Hello and welcome to yet another video tutorial brought to you by tutvid.com. Here in this video tutorial we're going to take a look at action scripting in Flash, Action Scripting 101. This is for the beginners, people who have not started action scripting, or maybe you have started action scripting but you just want to make sure you have most, if not all, of the basics down pat. Whatever it is, we're going to take a look at the basics here of action scripting, what you can do with action scripting, some of the cool things you can do with action scripting, and this is only touching on the very tip of the iceberg when it comes to action scripting. The amount of stuff you can do, it's absolutely incredible. Now, action scripting is something that makes Flash really special because one of the coolest things about Flash, and the thing that sets it apart from virtually any other design program, is number one, the fact that the Flash player is so widespread. So virtually every computer out there has Flash player. So whatever you can create in Flash, you can stick on the web and everybody can see it. But the thing that makes Flash special is its ability to create interactive experiences. And by interactive experiences, I mean experiences that require user input. And it could be user input from simply clicking a next button in a photo slideshow, to a user filling out a web form and submitting information to a database. The amount of things Flash can do just goes on and on and on, and as days go by, and weeks, months, years, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So the scripting and everything behind the scenes that powers this interactive experience and the ability for users to be able to click on things and things to change and things to become, visible and invisible, and being able to send emails and chat and all this kind of stuff through Flash is ActionScript. And if you want to be able to do all that cool stuff with Flash, you need to know how to ActionScript. And it really is not that hard. And if you just put your mind to it and you work on it a little bit, it's very easy. So the first thing we're going to take a look at action scripting, and something you ought to know about action scripting is there are actually several different versions of ActionScript. ActionScript 1.0, 2.0, and now 3.0 with the latest release of CS3. I'm not using CS3 here, I'm using Flash 8, so I'm using ActionScript 2.0 as well. So if you're going to follow along, the stuff we're doing in this tutorial is ActionScript 2.0. 3.0 has changed a little bit in some ways, and maybe more than a little bit in some ways actually, but we're using ActionScript 2.0, so if you're going to follow along here, I recommend that you use ActionScript 2.0, because it is different in very many ways than ActionScript 1.0. Okay, so another thing, actions. Where do actions go? If you come into Flash, you're just drawing stuff. You can't just write actions out on your stage and expect them to work like HTML and disappear or whatever. That's not how actions work. There are actually several different places you can put actions, and the two most common places that you're going to put actions are directly on button symbols, not movie clip symbols, not graphic symbols, button symbols, and on keyframes. You can't put actions on regular frames, but you can put actions on keyframes. You can place a keyframe by right-clicking and hitting Insert Keyframe, and you can place actions on that. Now, you can't just write the action out, obviously. There is actually an Actions palette. Come to Window, Actions. This is the Actions palette, and it's in here that you type all of your action script. And you're going to see this window a lot if you're going to be working with ActionScript, and you'll get very used to it. You may also see this window here, or this panel I should say, in the Actions window. Don't worry about that. I just click a little arrow. I recommend that you start scripting just hand scripting everything. In here, it's a bunch of built-in code, virtually the same code you're going to use. You can come into here and find stuff. There's all kinds of stuff in there, and you can dig through it and look to see what there is. I've done that before. It's kind of cool. But if you're just scripting something, I highly, highly recommend that you just script from scratch. So that's where you put your actions. Now, I'm not going to get into detail on those other sections of the Actions palette right now. A couple other little things I'd like to point out here about the Actions palette before we move on. A very cool feature Flash has, and actually Flash isn't the only application that has it. If you've worked with Dreamweaver, Dreamweaver also has it, and various other web design applications. And that feature is, let's just say I'm going to type on open parenthesis. As soon as I hit open parenthesis, Flash knows any one of these commands, or not commands, any one of these bits of code can go next and fill this statement here. So I can just scroll down and I could say on press. So when the user presses whatever. This wouldn't work in this case because if I'm placing this action on a frame, you can't press a frame. But on press, and that's what I want to point out, is that Flash also has that ability. It's smart enough to know what you're typing and can give you some assistance there. So that's something you want to keep a lookout for when you're looking to make changes or you don't quite know what code you need, but you sort of know what you need to get there. You can kind of start typing and, hey, Flash might surprise you. Another thing Flash lets you know when you get your code right. Again, Go Live does this. Dreamweaver does this. It lets you know when you get your code right by changing the color. So I'm going to type go to and play, and you can see there I put an extra capital L. It's supposed to be a lowercase l, and when I do that, the color changes to green. Now I am using custom colors for my script. You can come down here to preferences, and right here, identifiers, strings, and keywords, I have set to different colors. I don't even remember what the defaults are, but you can hit restore to defaults to check to see what they are. I'm not going to do that though because I like the colors the way they are. And a string too is just parentheses. You can type text, or let's just say this is a text string. Okay, and that's blue. Okay, so there's all sorts of different things that Flash lets you do. One other thing that I must point out, and I kind of hinted on it just a second ago, ActionScript and instances, which you'll start understanding if you watch some of my other videos after watching this one. But instance names and things like that, all of this stuff is case sensitive. So if I just type a simple stop command, it doesn't change color, and it's not right because this is a capital S. The S must be lowercase. You see, as soon as I do that, it changes color. So that's something you should always keep in mind when working with action scripting. If something's not going right, check to make sure everything's not only spelled correctly, but also has proper upper and lower case based on where you put capital letters and lowercase letters. So that's something very important to keep in mind when you're working with ActionScript. All right, one other thing that I'm going to point out is, yes, we just looked at where you actually physically type your actions, but where can you actually place actions? Well, there are several different places you can place actions, and when you place an action, it's considered an event, what's called an event, and there are, let me think, mouse events, keyboard events, button events, frame events, and even movie clip events. And all these different events, an event really is, let's say you create a frame event. Like you put a keyframe here and you tell Flash, okay, when the movie gets to frame 50, I want you to cover everything on the stage with black. Okay, that's going to be an event. That's going to be a frame event because you used a frame action to do it. Flash was fine until it got to frame 50, and then it made some change. Okay, a button event would be where something changes when you press a button. A mouse event, when the user moves the mouse or presses the mouse button or rolls the mouse wheel even. Keyboard events, when you press any number of buttons, numbers, arrow keys, space, or whatever you name it. Movie clips, there's certain movie clip events you can do. And did I get everything? I believe. Mouse, keyboard. So basically, there's just a lot of different ways you can utilize ActionScript, and there's just so much you can do with ActionScript. It's incredible. And if you haven't learned ActionScript yet, you really ought to do it. So let's take a look here at using some common code, and I'm gonna try to cover some stuff that you can pretty much start using right away in stuff you're working on. So let's get going. So in order to apply actions to a button, which is what we're going to do right here, we're going to apply some actions to some buttons, you have to create the artwork, or convert the artwork, excuse me, into a button symbol. Not a movie clip symbol, a button symbol. All of these symbols up here that I'm going to be applying actions to, I have converted to button symbols. I'll just emphasize that point. I'm going to select the pause button. I'm going to hit break apart. So now this is just the raw artwork. 2 rectangles with a gradient in them. I'm going to come up to modify, hit convert to symbol, button symbol, and I'm just going to name it pause button. And the name pause button is already taken. So I'm just going to name it pause button 2. There we go. And pause button 2 is not taken. So there we go. We know that we need to convert our artwork to buttons in order to apply button actions to them. You cannot apply code to just raw artwork like that. So this pause button, we're going to select it and we're going to bring up the Actions palette. Now, one quick thing I want to point out about the Actions palette, and working with buttons in particular, you must select the button. Make a point of clicking it. Okay, you can see the pause button's on its own layer, but if I just click that frame, okay, it looks like the button is selected, but if we check out the Actions palette, you see this says Actions on a frame. If I click the button, Actions on a button. So there's a big difference between the two. You cannot apply mouse actions, which are actions triggered by a mouse, essentially, when you click a button, to a frame because the user can't click the frame. So you have to make sure you select that button, otherwise your code will not work. Alright, so with that button selected, we're going to say on, open parenthesis, and here's that code help. We're going to say release when the person releases their mouse button. Now, here's the important thing. When you tell Flash that you want something to happen, you need to tell it what you want to happen. And what you want to happen, you have to put inside of what are called curly brackets. Okay, and I just placed two of them. The curly bracket is Shift plus the bracket keys that sit right between that slash key and the P key just above the Enter key. You'll see it there. So the curly bracket is the curly looking one. So place one, and then I usually hit Enter twice and place the closing curly bracket just as if they're parentheses. They just tell Flash where to start and stop, and this is what you want Flash to do on release in this case, when the person releases their mouse button. And all we want Flash to do is stop. So we're going to type stop, two parentheses, and a semicolon. It's another thing about Flash. Your lines of code, like this, not that like on release up here, you wouldn't put a semicolon here. But when you type commands like this, you need to end your lines with a semicolon. Otherwise, Flash has problems. So that's something you need to be careful of when you're working here in Flash. All right, so enough said here with this on release and stop. Let's take a look and see if it works. I'm going to come up here to Control and hit Test Movie. Notice the hotkey is Control plus Enter, or Command Enter if you're on a Mac. If I hit the pause button, it stops. Nothing happens when I hit the play button yet, but we will change that. Let's click the play button, hit F9 to bring up the Actions palette. Notice it's Actions on a button because I selected the play button directly. We're going to say on, release, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and here, instead of saying stop, I'm just going to say play. Two parentheses and the semicolon, F9 to make it go away, and hit Enter. Now, if we just press play, nothing happens. But if we press pause and then play, it plays it. So that's very nice. Now we're going to look at scripting the stop button. Now when you script the stop button, usually it's more than just pausing it like the pause button is. The stop button usually stops it and takes you back to the beginning. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to say on, release, open curly bracket, closed curly bracket. Now here we're going to say go to capital A and D, capital S for stop, go to and stop, open and close parenthesis, semicolon. Now for go to and stop, in between these parentheses, that's where Flash is going to go to and then stop. So you can type a number, and what a number is that frame. Okay, so if you've got 1,000 frames in your Flash movie and you type 900, it's going to go to frame 900. If I type frame 45, it's going to go to frame 45. But in this case, I just want it to go to the very beginning, so I'm going to type frame 1. And it's going to go there, and it's going to stop. So that's very good. You can also use frame labels. We're going to take a look at using frame labels in go to and stop or go to and play instances of code in just a minute, actually. But for now, we're going to look at that go to and stop. So here we go. We've got our pause, got our play. I'm going to pause it. Then I'm going to hit the stop button. It takes me all the way back to the beginning. Then I can hit play, and it plays. Pause it, stop it, play it, pause it, play it, pause it, whatever. Okay, so that's very, very nice. We now have scripted a stop, play, and pause button for your Flash movie. Now, remember, just a second ago I mentioned frame labels. Now, so far, the limitation that these play and pause and stop buttons have is the play and pause buttons only play the next frame. Let's say, and with the stop button, you can only go back to the first frame. Let's say I want to jump to a frame. Let's say frame 50. All right, well, what you have to do is, I can do one of two things, actually. I'm going to select this 50 button, actually, because that's our button here. I'm going to say on, release, close parenthesis, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, go to, and play. I'm going to put an open parenthesis, and you can see Flash is telling me I need to put a frame, either label or number. I could just say frame 50, close it off, and put a semicolon. Here's the problem. If I come back in later on, now frame 50 takes me out to here, right to this point. If I come in later on and I add 100 frames before this, frame 50 is now frame 150. So if I've done this with 100 buttons across my movie, I've got a really serious problem, because then I've got 150 buttons that I've got to go in, and I've got to switch this from 50 to 150. That's going to be very, very, very time consuming. So when you want to target a specific part of your timeline and jump to it, I always recommend you use a frame label, unless it's the very first frame, because that's the one thing that is a constant. Your first frame is your first frame. But if you're going to have that artwork on the first frame jump out to the second frame, put a frame label there. Just do it. That's what I always do, and it'll just save you so much time in the long run if you go back and it turns out you've got to change things. So what I recommend you do is I usually create a brand new layer using the Create New Layers button there, and I will just name this layer Labels. Excuse me. Now, what just happened there is I have created an entirely blank layer, just for frame labels. What are frame labels? Well, right-click out here at frame 50 and hit Insert Keyframe. You can place what are called frame labels on keyframes. And right here in the Properties panel underneath Frame, you can see it says Frame Label. So we're just going to name this frame label 50 per, because this is always going to be 50% of the movie. Okay, and you can see up here in the timeline now there's a little flag on that keyframe, and it says 50 per next to it. I'm going to select this 50 button, open up my frames, or actions palette, my actions palette, and when you type in a frame label, you have to put it in parentheses. So I'm going to hit Shift parenthesis. I'm going to say 50 per, close the parenthesis off, just like that. Check the script, make sure it contains no errors. We're going to go over that button in just a second, actually, because I think I completely forgot to talk to you about that. Okay, so we got go to and play 50 per. Close the actions palette. We're going to test it out. Hit 50, jumps right to there. I'm going to pause it. I'm going to hit 50 again. Takes me back. Stop it, go to 50, play, pause, stop, play, pause, 50, pause. Okay, so there's all kinds of things that happen there. Very, very cool. All right, one thing I just mentioned I was going to talk to you about, the check syntax button. What this is going to do, it's a good habit to get into before launching your code, just to check the syntax, just to make sure it contains no errors. If you do things like place all of your button actions on a frame, that will pick that up. It's going to do all kinds of things. It'll let you know you can't use certain things in certain places, and that you've got something wrong. It does have its limitations, but it does a heck of a good job at picking up a lot of common problems and things like that. So let's take a look at some other stuff here. I'm going to make another layer devoted entirely to ActionScript. This is another thing, if you've watched any of my other videos, I do this a lot. So here at frame 55, we are going to right-click and insert a keyframe. We're now going to create what is called a frame action. And on this frame action, we're going to hit or place a stop action, which is just that simple stop, open and close parenthesis, and semicolon. Close up the actions palette by hitting F9. Now, I'm going to play this movie. I'm going to jump right to frame 50. Notice it stops. Right there is frame 55. Now, that is a frame action. As soon as it gets to that frame, it applies that action, and it's stuck there. It's stopped. How can I unstop it, make it play? Well, I can simply hit the play button. That makes it play again. Okay? But that is how those frame actions work. When you get to them, they trigger. I could say go to and stop 50 per. Okay? Make sure you put that semicolon on the end. And now it's just going to loop. Watch this. Go there, and it's going to stop. If I switch it to go to and play, it's going to come out to frame 50, and it's just going to keep looping and keep looping and keep looping. Okay? So That's how a frame-based action works, is, whoops, when it gets to that frame, it executes the action that you have told it to execute. So that is how those button and frame actions work. We're going to take a look at a few common actions you can use now. These are going to basically be some button actions you're going to be using, and some other things that have to do with getting inside of movie clips and things like that, other interesting things. So let's take a look at them right now. Let's get on to these bits of code here. We have covered quite a bit of the basic code. Well, a little bit of it. Shouldn't say quite a bit, but we've covered a little bit of the basic code. We're going to take a look at some of the other things you can do with code here. Let's take a look real quick at, I have here in the library the Press Me MC button. Right there. We're just going to actually cut that off that layer and put it on its own layer. We're just going to name it layer 12 and place it on its own layer. Now, when we export this, you can see that it's just its own little, whoops, I pulled the wrong thing out of the library, of course. I actually want the Press Me button. There we are. I knew something was wrong. Let's come back up to layer 12. There we are. And the Press Me button. There we go. I should have known it didn't have the text. And you can see this is a button that I've just thrown together, basically. And we're going to use this to get to another website. Let's say you've got your Flash movie out on the web, and you want someone to click something and get to another website. That's super easy to do. We just hit on, release. We're actually going to say on press this time because we've been using on release so much. On press is not when a user releases their mouse button, but just that first press down. And I actually don't recommend you use the on press way of doing this often, because that, you know, as soon as people click, they automatically commit to it. By using on release, people can click and then drag away if they decide they don't want to go to the link or whatever. But on press, we're going to use it nonetheless. You need to type get in lowercase letters and then URL.